Hi, everyone, and welcome to Brexit, Lessons Learned in the First 2 Months. So this will be a panel event organized by Fruugo, the online marketplace specialized in cross-border trading. We're very happy that you're joining us today. And before I hand over to Håkan, who will be our chair today, I just want to do some very brief housekeeping. So after 10 minutes of introductions, this event will work as a Q&A session. So while our panel can discuss the topic of Brexit and how it's impacting e-commerce and international trade all day long, just the three of them, we want you to share your thoughts and questions so that we can make sure that they get raised throughout the coming hour. So please put them, any questions and thoughts, in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, and we'll make sure they get raised. And then I'll just hand over to you, Håkan.
Thank you very much. So my name is Håkan Tyr. I'm Chief Revenue Officer at Fruugo. So the intent of this session is to look back at the last few months, how businesses prepared for the changes on January 1st, look at what they did, what actually happened, and how they adapted to the new reality. Fruugo is a global marketplace. We have localized sites in 46 countries. And obviously, as such, we are very much affected by changes in the international trade environment. With me, I've got Matthew Clark from PwC and Mark Elward from Huboo. I'm going to let them introduce themselves. So let's start with Matthew, shall we?
Oh, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for that introduction, Håkan. So my name is Matthew Clark. I lead the PwC Customs, Excise and International Trade team. And probably, as you can imagine, since 2016, Brexit has pretty much been my working life and is continuing to keep me and my team busy.
Thank you. Mark?
Thanks, Håkan. Hi, everyone. My name is Mark Elwood. I'm the Chief Commercial Officer at Huboo Technologies. We're quite young. We've been around a couple of years. We are a e-commerce fulfillment specialist, primarily focused on B2C shipments. My background, primarily logistics, was last 15 years focused on e-commerce fulfillment.
Thank you, both of you. So, like I said, the idea of this event is to look at what we planned, what actually happened, and how we dealt with it. So Mike Tyson, the American boxer, once said, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the mouth, which he was referring to Evander Holyfield rather than Brexit. But I think it captures kind of the idea of dealing and adopting to an unexpected turn of events. And we've seen a lot of those over the last couple of months. So I'm going to kick it off by kind of a few observations about how we at Fruugo planned and what actually happened. So we're a marketplace, right? So what that means is that we help retailers advertise and sell their products across the globe and on our sites. It also means that we rely on retailers being able to continue trading across border even as the regulations change. So what we did is we prepared by providing as much information as possible about the upcoming changes. We ran workshops with different customer segments. The changes impact UK and EU and international sales differently. So we ran multiple workshops on that. Obviously, one of our main concerns was to make sure that we maintained a good customer experience for consumers. And with the UK leaving the customs union, there's that means that EU consumers are responsible for VAT. So when they order something on one of our sites and it's being shipped from the UK, there's a risk that they may be asked to pay additional to even receive their order. So what we've done is we've encouraged sellers to ship delivery duty paid, or DDP as it's called. And we set up a system to reimburse them for the additional costs that would involve. EU sellers, on the kind of flip side of that, were concerned about how to deal with the new UK VAT regulations that just came into place, both for direct sales as well as for sales on marketplaces. And we had to make some platform changes to provide additional data through our API so that they can get access to the information that they need to provide to adhere to the new requirements. So in January, glad to say it roughly played out the way we had anticipated. There were several sellers that came off the platform, but fortunately they came back on quickly because they had to fix something, and then they sorted it out and resumed. We did see a slight uptick in returns in January, but that came down again in February. So it might just as well be attributed to Christmas returns, I guess. And I think what we learned as a company was probably to try to communicate even more and as early as possible. I think one constituent that we arguably missed out a bit was our technology partners that also make use of our platform to provide services to our joint sellers, and we probably could have informed them more. So that's a learning for next time. And with that, I'm going to ask Matthew and Mark how they prepared and what the impact on their business with. So I'm going to start with Mark this time.
Sure, thanks, Hawkin. So really our preparation for Brexit started probably back in September time, whereby, like yourself, we had to make some internal changes to our dashboards and to our platforms to incorporate, drop-down fields like HS codes and country of origin and goods descriptions and all the type of information that's required for the new rules January the 1st. We also engaged with our carriers, so our parcel carriers. We've got a portfolio of 6 international parcel carriers that we engage with, and we had conversations with those in October, and some of them ran into sort of late November, even early December. I think the preparations for lots of companies, carriers including, was that the fact that the Brexit deal hadn't been done and it was pushed back, and everybody was, any day now we're going to get a deal, and we're not going to get a deal, we are going to get a deal. And this kept going on and on and on, and everyone said, well, let's just wait and see. But it just got closer and closer to Christmas, and it pushed a lot of things back, and it did for us also. We decided that we were going to use the DDU option, the delivered duties unpaid option, and see how we fared in January. And the one thing that really did surprise us was the impact of the delays in January. And everyone knows these weren't delays of one day here and one day there. These were huge delays, and some of the carriers you may be aware of that they shut down for a week or 2 weeks at a time to say there's no more shipments to the EU. Sorry about this. We just got an email notification to say sorry about this, and we'll let you know when we're back up and running. In the meantime, we had thousands of parcels in depots throughout the UK sitting there waiting to re-engage and get into the EU. So that certainly was a surprise. We've had some unusual stories during January. We had the story of one of our clients that sold dispatched an order of books, which, as you may not be aware, is 0 rated for VAT purposes. They went into Holland, and the buyer went into the post office to collect them, was told that they had to pay VAT on them. And when we dug a bit deeper, it was just a misunderstanding from the postmaster. And there's a few little niggly stories that occurred in January, but I don't think any amount of preparation could have prepared us for the delays that we had in January. So it's a sharp learning curve, but we've moved on since then.
Great, thank you. Matthew, what was your experience?
Well, I think it's certainly been quite a long journey in terms of Brexit for PwC. Started off in 2016, and then as Mark's just said, it was one of those journeys that took time to get right. We had to constantly evolve thinking, because you never knew how the conversation was going to go, the negotiations were going to go. We had a couple of false starts, didn't we, where we thought we were going to go earlier in the year last year, and we didn't. So it's been quite a tumultuous ground. But I think some of the clients that we've worked with that are most prepared have always known that they needed to look at their business operating model, certainly throughout the EU, and understand how do we trade between the EU and the UK, and not necessarily just for goods hacking, but what services do we offer? And if we move people around to enable sales and enable low service provisions, what impact is that going to have on Brexit? So we did kind of these multidisciplinary projects with an awful lot of our clients to try and understand how they could potentially be affected. There's an awful lot of data analytics modeling. We took their VAT data and looked at their intrastat reporting, which was pretty helpful because that had, what goods they were moving, the volumes, the value, classification codes, HS codes to 8 digits. We then extrapolated up to 10 to do some modeling for people. And I think that gave a good understanding of what the potential hit could be. To Mark's point, that free trade agreement with the EU came really late. What a Christmas present that was. Spent over Christmas reading through that, as did most of my team, trying to understand, what effect that would have on people for, kind of 7 days later when they'd have to start using it to bring goods in from the EU into the UK. So I think that caught everyone off guard. But we've been on a journey, as has our clients. I think there's a really mix of preparedness from business. Some businesses were very prepared, based on certain industries because they had to be. So, for example, like, the licensed medicine pharmacies, things like that, they all went pretty early in terms of understanding their supply chains. I think when it got to things like perhaps fashion and retail and food, a little bit later, I've got to be honest, was my general assumption of when they came to the table and started to prepare, and a mixed bag as to how they've been affected. I think one of the things that has certainly caught an awful lot of my clients by surprise was around the terms of the trade, so the purchase terms, the sales terms, and what exactly they expected to do within that supply chain, Håkon. So it's, what's my position? What's the role I'm playing? Am I the importer, the exporter? And you've got to remember, an awful lot of traders have never traded internationally before, never seen a customs declaration, don't know what it is, didn't understand the data that needed to go on it, didn't understand the timescales involved. So, Mark could do his job and ship the goods in a reasonable time frame. You can't just ring up someone and say, I want them shipped now, and expect them to arrive 2 hours later that we used to before we had a border. It's just not simply possible anymore. So it's just getting to the new reality, and I think that's what happened. But there was certainly a couple of difficult conversations to be had between suppliers and purchasers when they didn't truly appreciate, well, you said you'd supply to me, delivered duty paid. And then an EU supplier was like, well, I didn't realize that meant I had to register for VAT in the UK. And then I've got a domestic sale in the UK to complete on my VAT reporting, and just things like that. So I think it'll take a while for it to get to, back to normal for people. It's just getting used to the new trading environment, I think is how I put it.
Okay, thank you. So yeah, talking about kind of how our respective clients prepared. I'm going to jump on Mark again. What did you see your clients do or not do, as the case may be, leading up to the end of January?
Håkon, it was definitely not due in January. There was more doing in February and the preceding weeks. I think that the huge impact in January was the perception, previously October, November, December, was that as long as the UK achieved a Brexit deal, everything would be normal. We've done a deal, everything's hunky-dory, and we just carry on trading as normal. And I think, we even felt that a little bit as well, if we're totally honest, but certainly the majority of our clients was like, well, as long as we get a deal, everything will be fine. We don't have to worry about these duties and taxes and all this headache. That wasn't the case. And then come January, the late decisions, as Matthew said, in late December, certainly wasn't the case. And the challenges initially were, again, Matthew's aligned to it, was, inaccurate commodity codes, very vague goods description, just putting something very vague, which could, an umbrella of 20 subsectors under that heading, which obviously needed clarity. And all of this inaccurate information just led to delays with our parcel carriers. So, that we would ship, a few thousand parcels out, then we would get emails with lists of shipment orders that needed relevant information or didn't have codes, etc., and they were sat there waiting for these codes to be processed. So this, aligned with all the other delays, was a major impact in January. I feel now that that was January, that was the 4 weeks of January. Going forward, some of the retailers have had to really focus on their clients. They've had to understand what HS code is and what sector it falls into, understand accurate product descriptions, country and origin, and all this type of relevant information to enable that smooth process. And I think that the understanding of the shipping of goods into the EU has helped also, is that they are now aware, our clients are saying, I want to be able to offer a DDP service. Well, 2 months ago, most of our clients wouldn't know what a DDP service was. And there's definitely an education where, because we went, we chose DDP, deliver duties unpaid, we now have the options of delivers duties paid, which does take away some of that headache and that understanding. But it's the client's knowledge in a very short space of time that has been phenomenal. And also the options. So our clients are much more savvy now in terms of the cheaper economy service going into mainland Europe and the express services, the super fast express service. So the whole experience, I believe, for our clients, for our retailers, it's been huge in January, but I feel we're in a much better place. I think the clients that have sought that advice and had a real refocus on their products and the marketplace they want to sell into are the ones that are going to benefit greatly going forward.
Yeah, I think that the deal that came late was fascinating, because one thing that stood out to me was that we were leaving the customs union. I don't think that was ever in discussion. So we knew that changes were coming. We didn't know the finer details of that, but everyone should have and could have been prepared for that. So, but like you said, a lot of traders weren't. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the perception generally with most of our retailers was that if a deal was done, then we wouldn't have to worry about all this noise about taxes, duties, and taxes, and I think if you say it enough times, you believe it. And this was just generally the gossip around the ecom world was, as long as we get a deal, and these are the conversations we've had for many weeks. And when January did come, it was a bit of a shock. Was that, well, actually, we did get a deal, but we still got VAT, and we still got to do these EORI numbers and all. It's like, well, actually, I didn't think that was the case. So that was a quick, sharp learning curve for everybody in January. So, but I think it has definitely been a learning curve, and I do believe that our retailers are much more savvy because they've had to think, well, okay, I can't afford for any more delays. This is a really costly exercise. We need to get it right. We need to be accurate, and we're proving now that the noise has gone away. It's a much better place. Much better place.
Thank you. Matthew, in terms of what happened in January, any other observations from your customers being prepared or less prepared?
Well, I think so a lot of them have had quite a quiet January, up to kind of even the end of Feb, Hawkins. So, if you weren't moving food, which obviously has to ship fresh food, has to ship daily, right? A lot of the other clients that we have in other industries, including fashion, built up an awful lot of stock before the new year. So they tried to create quite a bit of buffer stock for themselves. So January and February, there wasn't as many shipments needed because they thought, I want to try and eliminate the need to move a lot of stuff across the border in Jan and Feb. Now, obviously, that doesn't quite work for ecom, but in terms of, creating a supply of stock to draw from, that's what a lot of them have done. So I do think there's a little bit of a lower volume of trade, certainly in terms of establishing stock on either side of this channel. I think, COVID and being in lockdown has certainly affected an awful lot of our clients. I think if you have a really strong e-commerce platform, then I think you've done, they've done quite well in terms of keeping that going, and a lot of their customers have swapped to that as a way of purchasing goods from them. But an awful lot of retailers didn't really have that well developed an e-commerce platform. So if the shops are shut, obviously the demand's not there for them. So a lot of them have struggled from that basis. But I think as we kind of get through the year, all the buffer stock starting to be eroded and go, we hopefully come out of lockdown in April, it starts to get back to normal, business starts to be trading, then I think you'll see the volumes come back up. And certainly, I'm not going to repeat the points that Mark said, but the customs data has been a real struggle for people. I think for me, some of the difficulties is around the misconception of what leaving the EU and a free trade agreement actually meant. Now, a free trade agreement would never get rid of the customs formality. So if you want to move goods from the EU to the UK, you need an export declaration from the EU and an import declaration in the UK submitted to HMRC. You've got to have someone willing to fulfill that role as an exporter and importer of record on both sides of the channel. And I think, you know, to Mark's point, a lot of people didn't understand that that would still happen even if we had a free trade agreement with the EU. And the tax side is, you know, it only gets rid of the tax if the goods meet the rules of origin between the EU and the UK that are set in that agreement. And that might be, you know, it's fairly easy, I guess, if you, you know, you mine something, you grow it, you rear it within the EU. But if you manufacture within the EU and say you're importing textiles from Asia Pac and then you manufacture, it's quite complex rules that you need to meet to say those goods qualify for EU origin. And then when they come into the UK, you wouldn't pay any duty and vice versa. And I think what caught an awful lot of clients by surprise is if they imported goods from outside the EU into the EU first and they hit an EU distribution centre, if you pay EU duties on those and then you ship it to the UK subsequently, you end up paying 2 duty hits on the same supply chain before those goods get to the end customer. So there's 2 sets of duty costs, which is obviously cost prohibitive. So we've suddenly seen an awful lot of realization of this tax cost within the supply chain. And then we've seen a lot of people, and Mark, you might be able to comment on this, trying to find third-party warehouse space, you know, to eliminate some of that double duty, but it's not that easy to find. If everyone's trying to find it at the same time, the capacity's not there. And then, you know, can I get a warehouse in my own right? Well, potentially you can, but it's not a quick process. You know, to prepare an application and then get it into HMRC, you're probably looking somewhere between 5 and 8 months to get a warehouse, you know, authorized by HMRC if you're starting from scratch to put it in place yourself. So it's just taken some time for people to do it. And of course, we're still in a light touch period in the UK hacking. You know, they brought this border model in 3 phases. We've got this initial phase in January, which is you're going to get a light touch. We haven't got full border procedures. 1st of April, the import licensing comes in for any products that require licensing. And 1st of July, it's full customs declarations and full border checks. And of course, an awful lot of importers are using this delayed customs submission for their declarations till July. So, you know, there's an awful lot that I think people are forgetting. There's another big change in April for anything that's licensed, and another big change in July when we get back to operating as normal. So still a lot coming our way, unfortunately.
So in terms of waiting till July, what are the downsides of doing that with when it comes to submissions?
I think the difficulty is, and PwC ourselves, we set up a brokerage at the back end of last year, and we've spoken to an awful lot of clients that we do advisory work for, and they've said, well, we're just going to wait. We've got so many other things to do with Brexit. We're not worrying about our customs declarations till July. And my response to that is, well, okay, I understand that. There's an awful lot to do. You've got an awful lot on your plate at the moment. But that doesn't mean that you can wait till July to start to pull together that customs data that, you know, Mark said, well, you need that to be able to do your declarations even at a later point. So what I'm saying to clients is, I don't want you to wait 6 months to pull that data together. As you go over the next 6 months, if you're delaying, start to collate that customs data, have the requisite documentation for all your movements of the purchase order, the shipping documentation. So when you have to submit them at a later point to HMRC, you've got all that information to hand. I think my worry, Håkan, is people leave it and then they try and retrospectively create all that customs data for those 6 months worth of movements, which I think would be virtually impossible if you leave it till June to do it. I think that's my concern with that.
That sounds like that would be a lot of work. Question for you, Mark. I've certainly seen this across our customers that are trying to shipping DDP. The prices have been all over the map in terms of what carriers have charged. Do you see that leveling out and coming down anytime soon?
We have seen that. Again, going back to January, we saw all sorts of increases and surcharges upon surcharges, and obviously we use different carriers, and you're trying to compare like for like, and there was no disciplines between, you know, DU services were sometimes a higher surcharge than DDP, and with other carriers it was a lower surcharge. There was just no disciplines to it, so it was somewhat bewildering. However, and it also sort of goes back to the thought where everybody hoping that they'd see what the deal would be in December, and well, we're not sure what it would be, so let's slap on a surcharge for January. You know, what's the administration involved in producing these declaration forms? Well, we don't know. Well, you know, X amount of pounds should cover that, so we'll slap that on for the time being, and let's see how we get on. But what we have seen since January, we've had all these surcharges, is some of them actually have levelled out, and some of them have been reduced, and some of them have actually been waived now and are no longer. So I think that, well, hopefully that will continue. So, but at the moment, we're sort of at a level playing field where some of those, mainly the administration charges now have been levelled out, which is, you know, great news.
Great news. Definitely. So looking at our sellers, yeah, I think probably they were reasonably prepared. A lot of them work with their fulfillment partners to get HS codes and all the relevant data. There was certainly a significant number that were hoping for the magic deal to solve everything. But I'd say the ones that had, you know, a bit of a stumble in January, a lot of it was kind of the devil's in the detail type of stuff, where they had thought everything through, but then there's some link in the chain where it falls down, like you get all the right data, but your label printer can't print the right codes on the labels or something like that. So we had several cases where people had to come off and, you know, do quick fixes or things like that to keep trading. And like you mentioned, there were, you know, some serious external factors as well. You know, we had a mutant virus spreading in the UK, and French, you know, shut the borders right before the end of December. Yeah, like you couldn't make it up.
It was the perfect storm. You know, we had the Brexit and coming later in the year. We obviously had the COVID. We had the big UK lockdown, and we had all the border issues in the first couple of weeks. And yeah, I mean, you couldn't. I don't know. Any amount of preparation wasn't going to prepare you for all this.
Yeah, I think border issues was arguably the biggest problem, where you know, border authorities just weren't really ready or geared up for kind of what was coming down the track. And I mean, we heard stories of some border authorities sending back entire bags of Royal Mail packages that hadn't even bothered looking at them because they were so overwhelmed. That seems to be settling out now. I would say that overall, I think our sellers they're coping, they're adapting. Like they did get punched in the mouth, but they've come back. It's definitely, I mean, it's gotten more complicated, but overall, I think people are continuing to trade. So I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we saw a dip in February. So January was the same in terms of volumes, because, you know, no one knew any different. I think that some of the lower volume sellers, you know, the people who are doing lower volumes on a weekly basis into the EU, said, okay, I just need to turn this off. It's a headache. I'm just going to sort of press the pause button and have a rethink of that. And some of those surcharges as well, some of those admin surcharges were horrendous. And they were like, well, actually, you know, for low value products, you can't go slapping on 50% increase in shipping costs. March already, and we're only on the 9th of the month, we're seeing an upward trend now. So we're hoping that this month we'll pick that back up again. And as I said previously, it's the real savvy retailers that have taken the time to get the right guidance, to get the right documentation together and have a real focus. They're the ones who are really going to benefit going forward. You know, the EU is a big marketplace. You can't ignore it. You know, you can't just turn it off. So you should keep that door open. It's just about doing your homework and having that information to push forward, because the resource is there. It's just a case of going out there and spending the time to do it. So, but we're encouraged by the results in March, and we're hoping that we can get that back up to the levels in January, December, and the previous year. At the moment, it's looking good.
We've continued to see really high volumes, you know, year-on-year growth. To your point, we've definitely seen more EU sellers pull back from the UK than the other way around, because obviously we're a smaller part of the overall pie than it would be for a UK seller. But and also they struggle to get used to the VAT reforms that came into place, which they'd better figure out since they're implementing it in Europe in July. So I guess the general question for both of you, do you feel that this is gonna, like, the changes are gonna put people off from trading internationally, either stop trading or never start doing it? Have you seen any of that, in any indications in that direction?
For me, I think it's about education. So we educate our client as much. I think you mentioned about workshops. Hawking is something that we've got in the pipeline, is to educating the client. Once the understanding of the process, it's not really rocket science. It's quite straightforward. It's just getting a basic understanding of what needs to be done, what steps need to be followed, and holding the hand and educating our clients and doing the workshops and the open days, I think will open new markets. As I said, it's not just the EU, it's global marketplaces, and there's lots of them, you know, that need to be opened, and it can't afford to be ignored. So I think, for me, I think that we'll push forward, we'll get over this. March, April, we'll push forward even more, and I think for the rest of the year we'll be in a really good place, and I think we'll get back to normal. So I don't see an impact. Obviously, with COVID and the boom of e-commerce, that's going to be around for quite a while. You know, there's lots of evidence to tell you that all those generators that never shopped online, who all of a sudden the last 12 months have been forced to shop online, will never go back down to the high street to get their higher dye or whatever it was they used to get down the high street, when they now learn how to, you know, press a button again online, which they've never done before. And so there's a whole new generation of people there that are going to start shopping online, and I just think that, you know, it's going to go from strength to strength, albeit a gradual growth. But from an e-commerce fulfillment perspective, that's my thoughts.
Yeah. One thing you sort of touched on, returns is one of these unfortunate downsides of e-commerce that we probably don't talk enough about. How will this impact returns handling? And let's start with Matthew on this one.
I mean, purely from a tax perspective, because Mark can go through the practicalities of how that could potentially work for people, but the problem with returns is if you get duty or VAT stuck somewhere. So, for example, if you send something into the EU, depending on the value, whether it's over £150 or not, you may or may not pay customs duty, but there'll be a VAT charge. Now, that VAT charge is paid by the customer themselves if you elect to use the customer as the importer record and it's a B2C sale. For ecom, for example, or perhaps you sell to a distributor on the EU side, and, you know, then either you're selling to them and there's a VAT cost for them to actually try and recover it. And the problem with returns is it's not that easy to get it back to an original country from a tax position. And just bear with me for a moment. So if I have goods that are free circulation in the EU, I send them out to the EU on my export declaration. I send them to a UK business. That UK business builds its stock up and sells to the UK public. That's fine. But if I want to ship them back to the EU because they don't sell, then you've got a question of, okay, what's my mechanism to get them back into the EU without having to pay EU tax again? So this is one of the things, Hawken, that surprises an awful lot of people. It's that if you move it across a border, when you move it back again, just because the goods originated from there in terms of that's where they originally shipped from, doesn't necessarily mean you don't have to pay duty on them again to get them back into that country. So there are reliefs for that. So you can use return goods relief. But in order to do that from a tax perspective, you've got to have sight of the export documentation. So if you can get the evidence to show, okay, that particular item came over on that shipment from the EU, from that exporter, and I can trace it. And it's that shipment and that parcel and that item that I'm then sending it back across the border again. You can potentially use return goods relief when you re-import it into the EU to not pay the duty. And that works in the reverse situation as well. But to do that for VAT, you've got to have the exporter and the importer have to be the same person. So that VAT can always be an issue, especially as I mentioned before. If the VAT is paid by an individual, it's not easy to get it back, and it could just be a cost that you have to suck up. We have seen some businesses, and Mark might be able to comment on this, trying to find a way of, even where it's the importer is the customer themselves, the member of the public, a way to reclaim customs duty and VAT on return goods. But, you know, we're seeing that some customs authorities are saying, well, okay, it's a paper application to do that. And I know one e-commerce retailer has actually just submitted 12 boxes of reclaimed paperwork to the Dutch Customs Authority to prove the point that, wouldn't you like to receive this returns information in spreadsheet? You're saying you want it on a paper. Here you go. Here's 12 boxes. Please work through them all. You know, it's just... Wow. It's not a practical way of doing it. And this is, I think, over time, it will become easier. Customs authorities will realise there's more efficient ways to do this to enable people to do what they should be able to do under the law, but it's just not practical at the moment. And I think it's that practical way of doing things that are stopping people from being tax efficient.
Mark, do you want to speak to the practical logistical way? Or
yeah, for us it's a big piece, and we're just implementing some return software now for our clients to do these calculations and to have it all within a seamless process, which we hadn't previously. And this you know, the returns is one of those measures that where Brexit has sort of forced us to say, okay, we need to do something drastic, because, you know, e-commerce fulfillment is about making it as seamless as possible to our clients. So the last thing we want to do is to offer our services and say, well, we can do that. But returns is a nightmare where we just don't want to get involved in that, and just, we're sorry about that. I hope you don't do many returns. Obviously, we can't do that as a business. And so, you know, we've been forced into the course, okay, we have to find a solution. So we're actually in the process of launching an e-com software for returns, whereby the duties and taxes are being calculated. Matthew's deep dive there with the VAT is probably the next stage for us. But from conversation on how Matthew's described it, it's probably something we want to rush into right now. And hopefully maybe there's some changes that are implemented before we have to. But right now, the priority for us as an e-com fulfillment business is to offer that seamless process for our clients, where they are clicking buttons and fields on a piece of software and bringing goods, you know, individual orders back into the UK. Just on your point, Hawkin, regarding in the mainland EU, where you've seen, you know, sales dropping off into the UK, I've had numerous conversations with e-com fulfillment houses based in the mainland, who are desperate also to have partnerships and warehouses in the UK, because obviously they have a circle of clients that are also keen to say, well, you need to get a partner in the UK and get a warehouse in the UK, and we can put products in the UK and ship, and it works both sides. So that, you know, there's and that, yeah, virtually every week I have one of those calls at the moment. You know, they're coming thick and fast, which obviously means there's a huge demand there, whereby their clients are requesting that.
We have a audience question that I think kind of ties into this, and it may be somewhat controversial. So the question is, do you think the UK and the EU will revisit any of the elements in the deal in the near term?
Matthew, I just think go for it, Matthew.
I think in the short term, probably not, Hawkin. I think they'll let that bed in, but remembering the EU is still quite busy on Northern Ireland. It's got its own unique situation. It's quite difficult to get things in and out. There's things that aren't working particularly well for that market. I think an awful lot of focus will be given to Northern Ireland, making that work, you know, more efficiently. In terms of the trade deal itself, I don't imagine they will look at anything this year. I think they will come back to certain aspects of it as they realise that certain bits are a little bit unworkable. Or what I often find is the legislation doesn't doesn't really give you the detail on the practical aspect of it. So you've then got to develop the policy behind it. And some of that policy development might then mean that the deal gets looked at again. But I don't think it's going to predominantly change, you know, certainly in the short term. I think it's here to stay for a while.
Okay. Thank you. I'm not touching that one. That's
no, absolutely.
So kind of to wrap this up, I have one final question. So as Matthew said, this is only the beginning. There are more changes coming, both in April and in July. From our standpoint, July is important because that's when the VAT reform comes into place in Europe. And at that point, we as a marketplace are responsible for collecting and remitting VAT. So what that will mean for sellers is that the whole discussion we had about DDP doesn't necessarily matter anymore, because now they can ship DDU because it's been paid, but they need to label accordingly. So I guess it's a long-winded setup for the question, which is, what have we learned over the last few months that retailers can use to prepare better for the next set of changes? And I think from our side, it's, you know, again, devil in the details, make sure that you understand how you will ship, what you need to declare, what data you need available to ship into Europe when the marketplace is suddenly responsible for VAT. But start with Mark, and what do you think?
Oh, my key advice, talking is always to seek guidance, because, you know, and it has to be professional advice as well, because we've had stories of people say, well, the last warehouse told me XYZ. And unfortunately, the last warehouse are probably not the people you need to speak to in terms of tax guidance. So the first point would be to seek advice, professional advice, and to make sure that they're fully aware of those requirements. The cost also in doing the sums is making those calculations and saying, actually, for XYZ products, these calculations work, and, you know, the shipping and all the extra surcharges, they work. But there might be certain SKUs in their product mix that it doesn't work, and, you know, they're very, okay, I'm going to take these off and sell them into Europe. We'll just take those away because they're not going to be profitable or not going to be viable. And I think, you know, it's the advice. I mean, what we're trying to do is to guide our clients as best we can and hold their hands. So we know that VAT registration is going to increase in the coming months. So we're partnering up with one of our partners that we're going to set that up very seamlessly, quickly, and cheaply for them. So there's some assistance, but really it's the advice. We're a fulfillment company, you know, core. We can guide them, but it's the actual professional advice that is key. And I think the people, as I said previously, take the time out and seek that advice. And if it's going to cost them a couple £100 to get that advice, then so be it. It'll be money well spent, because they're the ones at the front of the queue, in the front of those marketplaces, going global and reaping the rewards for the huge market growth going forward.
Thanks. Matthew, what are your thoughts on learnings?
I mean, I think, you know, getting the right data together is absolutely essential. You know, we talked about the 1st of April, where the import licensing requirements come in. If you don't have your classification code correct, which, you know, Mark talked about before, you can't determine whether you've got a license requirement to import your goods. And I know in the papers you see an awful lot, don't you, about products in terms of food and products of animal origin and fish and things like that requiring import licenses. But people don't realise there's also import licenses on certain types of ceramics, on metals, on wood products. So it can catch you out if you don't know and you haven't checked. And that's something that you only need, you know, one item in a truck that requires an import license and doesn't have it to stop the whole truck, and it can really disrupt the supply chain. And the other thing for me really is getting the right data in the right hands at the right time, Hawken. And I think people have to appreciate some of the difficulty that you've seen at the border is, so I'll use an example into Ireland. Irish Customs have been very, very clear that they want a pre-boarding notice for anything going out of the port on the west side of the UK before it goes into the Republic of Ireland. And they want that well in advance of your lorry or your shipment driving off the other side. So even if you're a logistics carrier moving an awful lot of different parcels for people, you've got to be able to enable that logistics carrier to do their job properly. You've got to give them the right data. You've got to give it to them with enough time to actually affect the physical movement. And I think people are still labouring under the assumption that they could do things like they could before Brexit in terms of timescale. It's just not like that anymore. What I think will happen is an awful lot of my clients are focused on keeping goods moving and keeping traffic flowing. But they're now starting to look at, okay, how do I optimize the model that I've got? So from your point, Hawken, you mentioned the VAT rules that are coming in July. How can I make the best use of those to make my model more optimized from a tax perspective for VAT? Can I do customs warehousing? There's various different models that they can use and find partners like yourself and Mark to optimize either their shipment, so it lowers their shipment costs or declaration costs, or it betters their tax costs. And that for me is it now. You kind of got to get used to trading as normal in this environment. You've kept your goods moving. Now it's a question of looking how to optimize all that and just make it a lower cost model for yourself. I think that's what a lot of clients are going to focus on over the next 12 to 18 months.
Thank you. I think that's a great point to take away and use that for a wrap up. Thank you very much to both of you for your sharing your insights of your own experiences and your customers. And with that, I'm going to hand it back to Gabriel to wrap things up.
Hi, sorry, took a few seconds. Yeah, thank you, Håkan, Mark, and Matthew. Really interesting discussion. Thank you as well for those of you who sent questions to the panel. If you have any further questions or thoughts, I've put our email in the chat box so that you can all see. It's fruugo@finpartners.com. Please email us and we'll get back to you with whatever comments or help or information you need. This event has also been recorded, so we'll be able to share that with you afterwards in case that's helpful. And yeah, thank you for attending, and we'll obviously keep you posted on any follow-up events later down the line as the industry continues to adapt to this new environment.